Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore Remote. We are very pleased to have this joint event with us tonight. We have Elizabeth Marshall Thomas, who is the celebrated naturalist and author of Growing Old, Notes on Aging with Something Like Grace. That is her newest book. She is joined by Isa Leshko with her book of photography and essays, Allowed to Grow Old, Portraits of Elderly Animals from Farm Sanctuaries, and they are joined this evening by their friend and author of Soul of an Octopus, among other things. She is also the author, most recently, of How to Be a Good Creature, and she has already written a book with Liz called Tamed and Untamed, Close Encounters of the Animal Kind. They are very lucky to have a friend with a joint friend, a mutual friend together. All of these books are available from Gibson's Bookstore, and our events program is sustained by book sales. They have each sent in signed book plates, which we will be including with any books purchased from Gibson's Bookstore this evening. So on that note, good evening. We do have a note here. Sy is the very best narrator of all time here from our audience members. So on that note, Sy, would you like to begin with Isa and Liz? Good evening.
Great. Well, this is a real treat for me. Liz and I have been friends for, we counted up, it's almost 40 years. And the first time we met, instantly, I went to interview her actually for a story, and we became such good friends during that interview that I dragged her back to the house to meet my ferrets, one of whom immediately bit her. And she said she didn't mind one bit. Now, most people don't like it when weasels bite your flesh, but I knew this has got to be my best friend forever. And Isa and I, we're newer friends, but I had the great privilege of writing the introduction to her beautiful book, or maybe it's called Forward, whatever it is, to her beautiful book, Allowed to Grow Old. And we met on a train as we were going to New York to the 92nd Street Y to do a reading there from her book. And we sit down and she immediately pulls out this amazing vegan feast for us. So I really know how to pick friends. So I thought it would be great to start out with some readings by you two to give us a feel for what's in your books. So Isa, do you want to start?
Sure. I just want to first say what a privilege it is to be here, and this is my first Zoom event, so I'm excited to do this with you guys. One thing I before diving in, I just want to make a brief statement. Activist Larry Kramer died this week, and the organization he co-founded, ACT UP, had as its slogan, silence equals death. In that spirit, I just want to take a moment to condemn George Floyd's brutal murder and the actions of Amy Cooper, who had called the police on Christian Cooper, an African-American man who apparently offended her because he had just politely asked her to follow the rules of Central Park and keep her dog on the leash. If you're feeling like me after this week, you're probably feeling tremendous grief and helplessness. I think it's really important for all of us to translate those emotions into positive action. So I encourage all of us to support 3 social justice groups in Minnesota that are responding to George Floyd's tragic murder. Visit their websites, follow them on social media, donate to them if you can. And those organizations are Minnesota Freedom Fund, Black Visions Collective, and Reclaim the Block. And I challenge particularly the white members of this audience to learn more about systemic racism and how to be an anti-racist. There are many great books that I can recommend, but to start with, and I know these can be ordered through Gibson's, I would say to start with So You Want to Talk About Race, and White Fragility. So these are the 2 books I would highly recommend, and you can order them through Gibson. So one of the reasons why I wanted to spend a moment making these comments is that my goal for Allowed to Grow Old was to inspire empathy for all living beings and for farmed animals. I hope that tonight's discussion does that and also encourages each of you to widen your circle of compassion in the world. So we need empathy right now. So let's all be a part of spreading compassion in the world. So with that said, I do want to dive into a story. In our discussion, we can talk about what inspired the project, but I thought it would be great to share with you one of the animals essays that I featured in the book. And this is a story about my friend.
Is it going to be a little bit closer to the microphone?
Okay, and so this is a story about my friend Babs. She was a donkey, and I will share with you her story. Okay. The moment I saw Babs's brown, unruly fur, I thought of my favorite Sesame Street character from childhood, Mr. Snuffleupagus. Then I looked into her soulful eyes, and all comparisons to Snuffy abruptly halted. The old donkey's eyes had a wariness that suggested she had endured trauma at some point in her life. During the first 17 years of her life, Babs had been used for roping practice on a ranch in eastern Washington. Donkeys are inexpensive, so cattle ranchers often learn roping techniques on them instead of on mechanical dummies. Many rodeos use donkeys for entry-level roping competitions. Roping involves electrically shocking a donkey to make her run, chasing her on horseback, and then tossing a lasso around her neck or rear legs to pull her to the ground. Donkeys endure this practice repeatedly until they are exhausted, maimed, or killed. When Babs arrived at Casado Safe Haven in Sultan, Washington, she was covered in rope burns. She also suffered from equine Cushing's disease, a pituitary disorder that causes insulin resistance and hyperglycemia. She was placed on a restricted diet of hay that had been soaked in water to reduce its sugar content. Whenever she was out of her stall, she had to wear a muzzle that prevented her from grazing on grass. Babs also arrived at the sanctuary with chronic laminitis, a painful inflammation of tissues in equine hooves that leads to lameness. Her condition was too severe to cure, but Casado's animal care workers managed her pain with twice daily ice baths, massage, and acupuncture. She also wore orthotic boots throughout the day. Despite her history of abuse, Babs trusted her caregivers and tolerated her foot treatments. She was no pushover, though, and she was never shy about expressing her displeasure. If her meals were even a few minutes late, she would bray loudly until the food came. She enjoyed massages, but snapped at anyone who tried to brush her. Eventually, she relented and permitted the grooming, but immediately afterwards, she would roll around in her stall's wood shavings in protest. She was perpetually covered in wood chips, and her staff referred to them as her sparkles. Babs was closest to a blind old Shetland pony named Peach Pie, who had been rescued from a hoarder. Although Babs could be quite domineering with other animals at the sanctuary, she was gentle with Peach. Soon they spent all their waking hours together. Like any close companions, the two would occasionally quarrel. During these arguments, the pair's attempts at ferocity were quite comical. Babs would kick up her hind legs in the air, but because of her orthopedic issues, she could only lift her hooves off the ground by at most a foot. Peach would respond by half-heartedly biting at the air. After a few minutes of fighting, the two would consider the matter settled and resume enjoying each other's company. Babs was younger than Peach, and when he died, her caregivers tried to pair her with a goat named Ethel. Although Babs was receptive to the new friendship, the goat was terrified of her and ran away from her whenever she came near. Fortunately, a pair of young miniature donkeys named Jacques and Olay arrived at the sanctuary. Despite her age, Babs went into heat upon meeting the teenage boys, and the staff jokingly called her a cougar. Although the boys had been neutered and were considerably shorter than Babs, they were still trying to mount her. They were separated from Babs until her heat period ended, and when they were reintroduced, a platonic friendship blossomed. The trio often got into trouble, especially after they figured out how to open the gate to their pasture. Sanctuary staff, though, did not mind their antics because they were delighted to see Babs so happy. Later, as her health deteriorated, Jacques and Olay remained close by her, even when she required stall rest. A year after I had photographed Babs, I returned to Posado Safe Haven on my final trip for this project. When I saw my old friend, I hugged her and buried my face in her fleecy cheek. I was told that Babs had survived a rough winter and would likely not see another one. On that day, though, she seemed robust and cheerful. I watched as she devoured her supper, and afterward, I picked sparkles from her fur. Her nose was as velvety as I had remembered. The following month, Babs's laminitis worsened considerably. Her caregivers and veterinarian decided it was time to end her suffering. On her last day, Babs was fed delicacies that had previously been off limits because of her Cushing's disease. She ate strawberries, peaches, watermelon, ginger snaps, peppermints, crackers, and apple pie. Staff and volunteers visited her throughout the afternoon to shower her with love. Reinvigorated by the attention, she rolled on the ground with joy and miraculously righted herself up without its assistance. Her passing was quick and serene. For weeks after her death, Babs' stall was left untouched. Her boots were arranged in a corner with her blanket, and her grazing muzzle hung on the wall. Mourners left roses and sunflowers on the ground where Babs had slept. A few months later, a traumatized llama named Phyllis moved into Babs' stall. She had been horribly neglected by 3 separate owners and was understandably terrified of humans. Although her caregivers have their work cut out for them, their memories of Babs sustain their hope that one day Phyllis too will find peace.
Wow. That's so great. Gosh. Well, I just knew I've got to say I had one good idea once, and that was to put Isa and Liz together. It seems so natural to be putting your book about being allowed to grow old with Liz's absolutely brand new book, unlike anything I have ever read about aging. So Liz, would you read for us, introduce us a little bit to some of the stuff in your fabulous book?
Gladly. If the sound doesn't come through well, just tell me. And okay, I thought I'd read from the beginning. Okay. Why write a book about old age? Nobody wants it. Nobody likes it. When I told a friend what I was doing, she said sarcastically, "That sounds like fun, because except for senior discounts, we see nothing good about it. When it comes, we try to hide it, while our minds and bodies crumble, and death is our only escape." But this view is needlessly negative. Death is the price we pay for life. Only plants, animals, fungi, and single-cell organisms have it, and all of us pay for it sooner or later. Like most of us, I see the price as extra high, something like getting a 6-figure credit card bill. Would it be nice to avoid it? I live in rural New Hampshire, and when I looked around for a debt-free entity, I saw just grass and trees. That didn't help. All of them will pay the price just like I will. Then I saw a stone in my field. 300 million years ago, about 10 miles below the Earth's surface, this stone was formed. Somehow it got squeezed up and out, and in 10,000 BC, a glacier brought it to the place where I saw it. By then it was 29 million years old. Assuming it popped from the Earth in a good place and had consciousness, it could have watched evolution transform a single-cell organism into a Tyrannosaurus rex, and later watched another dinosaur transform into a bird. With life and consciousness, the stone could have known what influenced these transformations: the climate changes, the great extinctions, the great recoveries. Just in my area, it would have seen the glaciers melting, the frozen earth recovering, plants starting to grow, and wildlife starting to flourish. Mammoths and cave lions passed by this stone. Pennacook and Abenaki people camped near it. European settlers arrived, built a house and a barn, and cut down hundreds of trees to make the field. This last is but a nanosecond in the stone's long existence. Even the scientists will never know what that stone could have known if it had life and consciousness. But as far as the stone is concerned, nothing happened. It doesn't even know when it rains.
Wow, Liz. God, you know, when I first met you, I'm glad I didn't know enough to be intimidated. And you had already, when we met 40 years ago, you had written 2 massive best-selling books. You'd lived as a teenager with the San, formerly known as Bushmen. You'd lived with warrior herdsmen in Uganda. And you had studied wolves and elephants and lions and had a leopard stalk you when your son was a tiny baby. So I got to ask, now you're writing about growing old. So tell us why this topic is just as worthy and as interesting as living with wolves and elephants and hunter-gatherers.
Well, I'm not perfectly sure that it is, but it's a perfectly good topic. I think. Well, it's the other things that we were talking about were different from what would be normal life for me, and growing old is different from what was normal life for me, very. And I'm sure this becoming old is you come in. It's almost like being in almost another species or another tribe or another. I mean, your values are different. Things are very different, and small but different. And I think, I mean, that's fascinating and that's valuable. It's like visiting another culture and seeing how they put things together and what they make of things. And being old is like that too. But you can actually become an old person. If you go to visit the San, you can't become a San, but you can become an old person. So there you are.
Wow. So actually you got to enjoy insights with this book that weren't even possible, I guess, because you're living the exploration
That's
into
true.
old age.
It's kind of more fun to go somewhere and see something that somebody else is doing. Than finding yourself maybe wetting your pants by accident or something like that. I mean, it's better to hear about it from somebody else than experience it yourself. But experience is experience, and go through.
Well, your book is so brutally honest. This is one of the things that I thought was so refreshing about it. It's hilarious. It's honest, and it doesn't try to make it sound like, oh, I'm 90 years old and I'm running marathons and having great sex. What's wrong with you? So why did you not try to write one of those, oh, old age is a bag of, bed of roses?
Well, to me, there's something valid and valuable about old age. I saw a woman on television. I don't know what she was doing. She was 80 something years old, or maybe almost 90 years old. And she'd had so many facelifts and things. You'd think she was 30, literally, when you looked at her. And I thought, gosh, that's disgusting. I mean, she said perfectly frankly that she was 86 or whatever it was. And it was just amazing. And I mean, who wants to do that? I guess she did, but is there something wrong with being old? Yes, there is, but old people don't feel that there is. Other people do. Well, she to do what my God, I never saw anything like it.
Boy, I know. It's like when you see someone who's had their teeth whitened and you're like, what's wrong with that person? It's like, what's wrong with their teeth? And you don't even know what's the problem, but they just don't look right. But that brings me to Isa and how the photographs in your book, like Liz's words, are unflinching and unsentimental. So I wonder if you can talk about the approach that you took to this subject, not trying to make it sound like being an elderly animal is necessarily a bed of roses either. Why did you decide to do this book?
Well, to start with, I just want to also comment that I think of Liz's book. Can everyone hear me now? Because I saw that there were some comments. So I thought of Liz's book as a gift because it was also a roadmap on how to prepare for your final stage of life and how to prepare also for your death. And it was a gift because so many of us don't want to think about it, don't want to talk about it. And I think that there was a part of a scene in her, or a section in her book, in which you wrote or shared a letter to your family members about your wishes. And it was just so beautifully written and clearly written. And it was clear that it was written with love. So I just want to say that about your book, Liz. As far as what inspired me, and I think part of the reason why I connected at a deep level with Liz's book is that I had been a caregiver. My sister and I had been a caregiver for both of our elderly parents. My mom in particular had Alzheimer's disease. And so it was a really challenging time for us. And I didn't make any artwork during that time. I wanted to be focused on being a daughter. I wanted to be focused on being a good sister. And just, quite frankly, I was exhausted by the end of each day. I couldn't even think about making artwork. And then I had a chance encounter with this blind old horse named Petey. And he was in my sister's in-laws' house or property. And I had never seen an elderly horse before. And he was so beautiful. He had cataracts and he had a deep sway in his back. And I was just so drawn to him. I ran into the house, grabbed whatever camera I had with me, and at the time it was a toy plastic camera, the Holga, and I spent the afternoon with him. And I didn't fully understand why I was so drawn to him until I looked at my negatives. And then I began to realize that I was connecting with him because I was exploring my feelings around my mom's aging. There's nothing like witnessing and being with an aging parent that makes you aware of your own mortality. And I think being able, what initially drew me to photographing elderly animals was because I just needed to work through those feelings of grief and fear. My mom had Alzheimer's disease. My grandmother had it. So I'm terrified of aging. And one of the other things I appreciated about Liz's book is her mom lived to be, was it 104, I think? You know, to see an alternative perspective on aging, alternative experiences of aging, because my mom died in her early 70s. So then I visited sanctuaries to begin the project. And there are sanctuaries for rescued farm animals. These are animals who come from a variety of circumstances. Some are fell off trucks on the way to slaughterhouses. Sometimes they are rescued from hoarding cases or backyard butcher operations that have gone bad. Or they all go bad, but in which the authorities were called in. And these sanctuaries give a permanent home. They provide medical care, and they provide a permanent home to these animals. And when I began visiting these sanctuaries, meeting these rescued animals, I just fell in love with them. And it felt like it was selfish of me to use photographing these animals as a way of exploring my own emotional baggage. So at that point, the work became more focused on advocacy. I wanted to use my images to tell these animal stories and advocate on their behalf.
Great, that's great. That makes me want to ask Liz, at what point did you feel that you kind of transitioned from one life stage to the other?
That's a good question. I think it was because I began forgetting. Well, we all forget names early on. I think most people forget names. I began to forget nouns, and then I forgot a verb, and I mostly nouns, but not. And I was doing it so much that I thought that's what really got to me was the amount that I was doing that. Forgetting stuff, losing things. Not, I mean, I knock on wood, haven't lost anything permanently. I found it eventually, but you feel more uncertain. You feel, I mean, I remember feeling that, oh, I won't lose anything. I'm fine. I know where everything is, and I never had trouble finding words for things or names. And the change from that is quite dramatic for the person that it's experiencing it, because you realize you're becoming something different. And yeah, and
well, you talk about that in the book, how at one point you're the children, then you're the young people, and then you're kind of like the adults. Yeah. Can you tell us about that? I'm so interested in how you talk about time and the passage of time, and how you know you've become an elder or senior or old. Could you tell us about that?
Well, I think when we're young, I mean, when you think what 1 year means to a young person, it's infinity, and many things have happened that the person didn't know anything about before, and 1 year to an old person is nothing. You don't even realize that there was such a thing. It was just goes by, and oh gosh, yeah, now it's 2020. Yeah, that's right. And because I guess the surprises or the learning things or everything is an adventure of sorts when you're little. And I was thinking, I counted up I compared a 23-year time period when I was, for the first 23 years, with a 23-year time period now. Somebody asked me how, somebody wanted me to sign a book that I wrote. And they asked when I'd written it, and I didn't remember when I'd written it. But we looked it up in the copyright, and there it was. It was 23 years. It was 23 years ago. And I thought, and it seemed to me like just the other day that I'd done it. And so then I thought, well, I'll see what 20 years did for me when I was little. And my God, I mean, what didn't it do? I learned to walk. I learned to read. I learned to write. I learned to thousands and thousands of things. And I went to school. I went to high school. I went to college. I got married. I met my husband, got married. I lived in Fort Bragg. He was drafted and stationed in Fort Bragg in North Carolina. So we lived in North Carolina, which had apartheid. North Carolina, I'd lived earlier in South Africa. And North Carolina's apartheid was exactly like South Africa's apartheid. And disgusting, but there it was. And I worked for an African American woman who ran a school for disabled African American kids. And a white guy tried to run over me because they realized I was fraternizing.
God.
And it was really, okay, I learned all that in 23 years. And what's that compared to the last 23 years? I figured I learned more about something about commas. And now I'm considering myself a comma expert. And my next book, I think, is going to be a 400-page book on commas.
Oh, that's fabulous. Oh my God.
I enjoyed the section in your book in which you talked about how you would push back on copy editors, and you had very strong opinions on the use of commas and when they should be used. And then later in the book, you had mentioned that STET, wasn't that your license plate?
Yes, it is.
Still is.
Yeah. Yeah, for people who don't know what STET is, it means it means leave it as it is. So when an editor changes what you've written, you rub out you scratch with a pen over what the editor said, and you write STET, S-T-E-T, and that means leave it like it is.
I love that that's your license plate.
It's my license plate. It's also that my husband's initials and mine spell STET, so that was nice too.
This is perfect.
So I have an audience question here that I think would fit nicely here. Liz, the question here is from Susan. Liz, did you know Donald Hall? He also had some very thoughtful observations on old age.
No, but I know who Donald Hall is, yes.
We had dinner with him.
Yes.
Liz, do
Yes.
you remember?
Yes.
We had dinner with him and his wife, the poet, who gave me the best travel advice I ever had, which was to carry little tiny wet naps with you when you go to tropical countries and whip them out. And it's like a shower. Anyway, yeah, we had dinner with him and Peter Davison.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember. Yeah.
Are there other questions, Elizabeth, from the audience?
Not yet, but this is a good opportunity for us to remind you that if you do have questions or things you would like to talk about, you are welcome to click around and find the chat box or the Q&A function, and we would be happy to read these questions out. This is also my opportunity to remind you that Gibson's Bookstore events program is sustained by book sales, and the books are available with signed book plates via Gibson's Bookstore's website. The link will be in the chat, and any follow-up emails. Isa has a kitty cat up. What is kitty cat's name?
This is Alfred. and it's getting close to Alfred's. This is Alfred, and it's getting close to Alfred's dinner time, and he's letting me know that.
Well, we'll try not to keep Alfred waiting too long.
Do you have questions coming in? Alice asks, Liz, how old are you in your mind?
Ooh, that's a good question.
That is good.
In my mind, I'm the same age I am in years, which is 88.
All right, Liz, what is the most dramatic thing you have to say about your discoveries getting old? Dramatic.
Dramatic. I'll have to think.
We can circle back to that one. And Liz, what are you writing now? Is it about commas?
So I was asked to, very luckily for me, other countries like the books I've written, and one of them wants me to write more of the Paleolithic novels, one more novel like that, and that's Korea likes that, and I'm thrilled to do a book if Korea likes it. I'm overjoyed, and I started another book about a person I know who overcame very, very difficult childhood and alcoholism and all sorts of things to become a really terrific person. So that's kind of fun. And the third one is the Paleolithic novel, and the Paleolithic novel. Then that one. Oh yes, and somebody asked me to write a book for children, not little bitty kids, but maybe 10 years old. I don't know. I've never written a book for children. And I started one, but then I got swept away by all this stuff that's going on. So I've got 3 out there waiting to be written. And
so we have another question here. What is your favorite animal? I suppose I would like to hear this from each of you. Isa, what is your favorite animal?
Well, with Alfred sitting on my lap, I have to say cat. I'd be in trouble otherwise. But I do love pigs as well, and I have many pig friends, so I do love pigs as well.
And Sy, what about you?
Well, Thurber's upstairs with Howard right now because it's like snuggle time for him. So, but he's my favorite individual animal who's alive right now.
Thurber is a dog, right?
Yeah. Yes. He's a border collie.
And Liz, what is your favorite animal?
well, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I have one. I'm very attached to my dogs and cats, and have been very, very attached to the dogs and cats I've had over the past 50 years. But I mean, I tremendously admire every wild animal that I can think of. And I mean, they're fascinating and really fascinating. And I just don't, I guess I just couldn't find a favorite. And they all are favorite.
So what are, to Isa and Liz, what are the key things that you'd share with others about how to treat those who are aging? How do you think how do you most like to be treated as you age? Or how, Isa, I suppose, how do you perceive non-humans like to be treated as they age? And do those things only apply to aging or to life in general?
I definitely think the key to that question is the life in general. I have found that even with older relatives, that people have a tendency to treat older people as though they're children almost. And I think that treating people with respect, understanding what their needs are, and being able to meet them is important. With senior animals, it varies. You know, a lot of senior animals develop arthritis. And so at the sanctuaries that I visited, the senior animals would receive sometimes some anti-inflammatory medication rolled up in molasses, because a lot of animals can't resist molasses. You know, they sleep a little bit more. They aren't necessarily as active, but they still enjoy their lives. And I think it's important to savor that time that we have with our beloveds who are aging, and whether they are human or non-human. Alfred is now 13, and I can tell he's aging. But cats are like wine; they get better with age. I mean.
Well, that is an excellent answer. Liz, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, my cat, Claude is his name, and I don't see him right now, but he's in his middle teens or older. He just appeared one day, and he's been our cat ever since. And his aging is interesting. One of the things that I thought was wonderful about well, Isa's book and the reasons about it. When animals age, they don't feel the same threat about it that we do. I don't think they notice the difference. I'm sure, but they don't. What I thought was so wonderful was that there they could be if allowed to live. They can be. They're comfortable. They're quiet. They rest. They're safe. I mean, kind of what more do you want? And
they want what we all want, to grow old in peace, comfort, and to be loved.
Yeah, yeah.
Liz, you wrote in your book that old age is like the harbinger of a predator coming.
Exactly.
The predator being death.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we feel that.
Well, yeah, we. Well, I think when we were evolving, the predator, the death was a predator in most cases. I mean, lots and lots of things don't live to old age. That's an unknown for the wildlife by and large. And I mean, very few. And the older you get, the more likely you are to have a predator kill you, because it's easier. You're easier to kill. And we see death as, in many ways, we see death as a predator. What do you call it? It wears a hat and it carries the Grim Reaper. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's a predator, and I think it comes from. Well, I think we kept the caution that was instinctive, if you will, by with good reason when we worried about real predators. I mean, we're a primate, and we had primates become the victims of various predators, and so we came from that line, and we very sensibly fear predators, and death we see as often, and we imagine death as a predator. So, and why not? I mean,
that's why I get a facelift, right?
As you say that, they say in literature that death stalks us, just like a predator. So it's right there.
Yeah.
That's right there. So I think we have time for one more question, and then it is time for Kitty's dinner. So let's see. We have a question here. Oh, there's a reminder. Last time you were at Gibson's, there was a pig in attendance. Do you remember?
Yes, there was. I know who's saying that.
So we have a question here. Which of your books was your favorite to write, Liz? And then Isa, I'll ask you, which of your animal subjects was your favorite to photograph?
Okay.
I think, oh, I don't know. It's very hard if I have to pick one. A Reindeer Moon. It was a novel.
And Isa, which was your favorite animal to photograph?
I would say it's tough because it's kind of like asking which is your children is your favorite. So I will say that it is challenging, but I will say probably Melvin was the one that I laughed the most with. Melvin is an Angora sheep, and he looks like a little English barrister, doesn't he? And he was so affectionate. He would jump, he would put his hooves on the gate whenever I approached. And in many respects, he was the most challenging to photograph because every time I would crouch down to photograph him, because I like photographing animals at eye level, he would come up to me and then start pawing at me, asking for attention. So we spent a lot of time laughing together. So Melvin, and the name, Melvin, isn't that like the perfect name for a sheep? So Melvin, I would say, is very much dear to me.
Sy, let's turn this to you. Do you have a favorite book to write or a favorite animal encounter?
Well, I loved Soul of an Octopus because that was like becoming friends with an alien.
That's fascinating. I remember you talking about the octopuses at your event at Gibson's, and you're talking about how they would reach, when they learned to trust you, they would reach their tentacles up your arm and just sort of embrace you.
I had to go home and explain to Howard why I had hickeys all over myself when I got back home from Boston.
Friends with an alien. I feel like that needs to be embroidered on a cushion. Great. Okay, so
I just realized Melvin was an Angora goat, not a sheep. So I had to name it there. But important distinction.
Well, Melvin would want that distinction.
Yes, definitely.
Not a sheep, he's a goat. Thank you very much. So with that, it is Kitty Cat's dinner time. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Isa. Thank you, Sy. Thank you everybody joining us from home. A final reminder that our books and signed book plates are available from gibsonsbookstore.com, or you can call us 603-224-0562. We are all in this together. We're joining you from home. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you again. Have a great night, everybody.
Night.